One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's Bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Okay, if you have been around this podcast for a while, then you know I love to talk about how to start, launch, and market your podcast, right? Like that is the whole premise behind this show. However, I feel like I've done a disservice to everyone listening to this podcast. So today is all about righting a wrong that I just, it's only in hindsight that I can see how vital this piece of information was, and I apologize. But today we're going to talk about podcast launch goals, because there's an episode of the podcast, How to Launch a Podcast, and I'm going to link to it in the show notes. But in that episode, I didn't really talk about launch goals. I just talked about all the practical ways you can actually launch a podcast, but we didn't necessarily go into what to expect, how your launch plan may look totally different than someone else's. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Because if you've been thinking about creating a podcast for a while, well, I'm so glad you found this show. Think of this as the shortcut / time-saving version of searching Google and YouTube for hours and hours trying to figure out the world of podcasting. Trust me, as a busy mama of 3, I get it. You don't have a lot of time to be spent or wasted, I should say, searching the web, trying to find all the right ideas and all the amazing things that are out there, and you just end up overwhelmed. Trust me, I've been there, done that, took home the souvenir. But this podcast is going to help you in practical ways, because twice a week we'll be delivering episodes that are going to give you steps to help you create a podcast your audience can't wait to listen to. So let's get right to it, shall we? So, like I said in the intro, there are many different types of launch goals, and that's really what I want to talk about today. And then you can self-identify with which one you most resonate with. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're in the process of creating your show, or you're thinking about creating a show, these are the things that I want you to take into consideration on what you can expect for different podcast launch goals. So the first one, we're just going to start off with the big bucks right out of the gate because I want to address this first. A lot of podcasters really want to get on the new and noteworthy of Apple Podcast. And I'm just going to be totally honest with you. It is a 100% mystery to how you actually do this. If someone tells you they know the exact formula, then they probably work for Apple. Other than that, no one really knows. But that's not to say that we don't have a lot of clues as to how you can get on new and noteworthy. So in order to achieve this amazing status, you have to have so many podcast downloads within the first week of your show, so many subscribers and reviews and ratings and listen time. Like there's a lot of factors that go into Apple paying attention to your podcast and really saying, hey, whoa, like this one is something that other people need to know about. So if that is your overall goal, I'm going to give you some tough love because it is 100% doable to achieve this status. But if you are starting from scratch, you have no audience, no existing audience, you have no social media following, and you are just hoping that you can publish a single episode, put it out there, and cross your fingers, it's not going to happen. Okay, like tough love, coaching time, like that is really this whole episode is going to be some tough love and some gut check reality stuff because I see so often podcasters that are disappointed, like they are ready to throw in the towel as soon as they launch because they weren't picked up for new and noteworthy. But unless you have an existing audience with thousands of followers and people that are just chomping at the bit. As soon as you publish, they're ready to go. They're going to go subscribe and listen to everything and do all the things. Then it's most likely not going to happen that you get on new and noteworthy. Now, what if you're saying, but Crystal, I'm starting at 0, but I want to get that thing. I want to get this. I want to say that my podcast was on new and noteworthy. Then it's still possible. You just have a lot more to do on the front end before you get your podcast up and going. I said front end. I meant back end. You know what I meant. I was thinking front end of your launch, but it's really the back end. You're going to have to put a lot more work into what you're doing behind the scenes before you ever actually launch. Now, this involves growing your audience, growing your social media following. If that's how you're going to promote your stuff, you need to have people that are ready to listen as soon as you launch, and you need to grow your email list. Now, growing your email list is not something that I talk about a ton right now on the podcast, but it's going to be something going into the new year that I talk about more because it's so important. And I've been told this for years and years, but I have seen the fruits of my labor in growing my email list this last year. So if that is something that you already have a highly engaged list of followers that are like, they read all of your emails and they click on everything that you send them and they're fired up to learn from you, then you do have a real shot. But if you don't have all that, just be realistic and let's pick another goal to shoot for, because that is not the only goal of your podcast launch. But it's why I wanted to share it, because it's kind of like the elephant in the room is like, oh, I just want to get on this. Well, I wanted to tell you how you can do it and let you know some of the realistic things that you need to consider in order to achieve that status. And maybe you've already self-selected and said, nope, that's not for me. Keep going. What are the next ones? So that's number one. The second thing that could be a podcast launch goal for you is to just put your content out there. And I know compared to new and noteworthy on Apple, you're like, Crystal, that doesn't sound like a very big goal, but it is. But it is, especially if you are just in the creation phase and you're like, I'm scared to put my stuff out there. And if that's you, if you feel that, like you heard those words and you raised your hand, you're like, yep, that's me. I'm scared right now and I don't really know what to do. I want to tell you that is 100% normal. 100%. When people are creating the content and they're getting super excited for what's to come, but then it's actually like it's the week of your podcast launch, a lot of people start freaking out. And there's a few reasons. They are thinking, oh my gosh, what if I am awful? What if no one cares about this? What if someone writes to me and tells me that they hate me, they hate my podcast ideas, and they think I'm stupid, they hate the sound of my voice, they can't stand my Texas accent? Oh, do you see how quickly I'm rattling all of these off? It's because that was me. I've been in your shoes. I've worried about my own content, and I'm happy to tell you, here we are, episode 112, that you can get past this. That you can make it through your launch, have a super successful launch, and use that momentum to carry you throughout the rest of your podcast. So if just putting your content out there is going to be the thing that you, like that is your goal, that's fine. That's 100% fine. I think that is actually an amazing goal to have. And if you go back to the episode where we talked about announcing your podcast launch date, that's the reason why I have you do that. Because if you don't announce your podcast launch date, you're kind of just sitting around procrastinating for a long time. Because you can continue to come up with new episodes. I mean, I've met people that are like, oh, I have 6 months worth of episodes that I've recorded and that I've banked. And I'm just like, okay, but when are you going to start publishing it? And they kind of look at me like, well, why would I put it out into the world? Like, this is for me. Like, and I'm thinking, well, then what you have is an audio file. Like, you have your own audiobook that you're creating that you yourself, like, you're the only one that's going to listen to it. But until you actually put it out into the world for other people to interact with it, then it's not a podcast. So if that is your goal, is just to put your content out there, 100% fine. I think that is a fantastic goal. And if you need me to give you a little bit of a boost and say, you can do this, you can do this. I promise you, if I can do this, you can do this too. So this is your sign. If you've been waiting for it and saying, I just need a sign that tells me I'm ready to launch you're ready. You're ready. This is it. Okay, the third podcast launch goal is to just gain some momentum. So I recently, y'all might have listened to the episode I did with Suzanne Bizarco. She is one of my students, and she told me that she really just needed to gain that momentum. Like, that is like, she told me, she was like, I don't really care about getting on New and Noteworthy. Like, that would be fantastic, but I know that I need to build my audience more, and I just really need the momentum to get me going. It was almost like an accountability for her. And I love this. And I've had a few of my other students and clients say this as well, is, I feel like I just need to get going because I need accountability. And whenever I sit and think about there's people waiting, or there's people that, like, the podcast date alone, like knowing that I have to put out an episode every Tuesday, that's kind of hanging over me like a deadline. And I need that. I need that accountability. Otherwise, you have the people that are, they've got 6 months banked and they're just ready to go. And it's like, yeah, but until you put it out there, it's not really a real podcast. So I think that putting your content out there to just help you gain momentum is a fantastic goal. That is such an awesome goal to have because it will hold you accountable and it will help you stay consistent with your episodes. So the fourth thing that I wanted to share with you today is not necessarily a goal for your podcast, because I'm not going to sit here and tell you. People ask me all the time, and I see this in podcasting groups that I'm a part of, and they ask about statistics. So what are the statistics? Like, what should I plan for? What should I hope for? What is realistic? And I'm going to tell you something you probably don't want to hear, but I'm not going to tell you a specific number that you need to have because it's going to be different for everybody. Going back to, do you already have a platform? Do you already have people that are waiting on day one to listen to your podcast? It's going to be different for every single podcast. So I don't want to set you up with the idea of you have to have X amount of downloads, otherwise you're a loser and you're a failure and you should just quit. Guys, no, I'm not about that. I almost said mama ain't about that because no, I don't need to say that. I'm not your mama. I'm going to say your coach is not about that. Okay. I'm just calling myself your podcast coach. Okay. That's not what we're about here. That's not how you get your players to get better. It's not how you get your players to try harder when you tell them they tried their hardest, but they still suck. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not buying into that. If you want to share with me, if you want to send me an email and you say, Crystal, I got this many downloads whenever I launch my podcast, I'm going to celebrate with you no matter what that number is. Because I'll be honest with you, I didn't have what I would say is a super successful launch, but I still had people show up for me. And I still had people that kept coming back week after week after week. And here we are today as this podcast has transformed into what it is. So I want you to be grateful for every single person. Every single one of those listens, that is an actual person on the other side of those headphones, on the other side of the microphone. That is someone listening to you, to your message, to what you have to share. So I don't want you going and chasing these vanity metrics of, oh, I got so many downloads and I'm so popular and everybody loves me, because that's just your ego. Okay, that's your ego talking. It's your ego being obsessed with the numbers, and I don't want you to think that way. Now, with that being said, the caveat behind that is you probably will be obsessed with your stats the first week, and that's totally normal. Actually, in my interview with April, she's one of my other students, we talked about that. We talked about checking them like every hour, and guys, if you're with Buzzsprout, that's my hosting site. If you're with them, they don't update the stats every hour. I want to say it's like every 6 hours. So it's kind of pointless to refresh your browser. You're like, oh wait, I got to check it again. Hang on. Did one more person listen? Like, don't do that. Don't drive yourself insane. I understand. I know it's exciting because you're like, oh my gosh, I put this thing out into the world and someone is actually listening to it besides my mom. I get it. I've been there, done that. But I don't want you to obsess about, I didn't hit this one specific number that I had in mind for my podcast. Therefore, why am I even trying? Because I've seen that. I've seen it happen actually too often. And it's very discouraging. So I want you to go out, try your hardest. This is my coach talk now. Okay, you're my players. I want you to go out, try your hardest, give it your all. And no matter what, we are still going to shake hands at the end of the game and say, you did a good job. Okay? So just know that going in. And actually, there's an episode I want you to go back and listen to. If you have not launched, or if you've recently launched your podcast, there's an episode called Podcast Growth. When will I see it? And I'm going to link to it in the show notes. And I really want you to go listen to this because it's going to give you a realistic idea of when you can expect to see your numbers increase And I share with you a lot of my own personal story with this podcast and how things have shaped out for me. So I want to make sure that I mention that because I want you to go listen to it if the stats, like you're just kind of concerned and you're worried, you don't know what to expect, go listen to that episode. It's going to help you. But that's all I have for podcast launch goals. So I'm going to do a recap real fast. So the first thing is to get on the new and noteworthy of Apple Podcast. And this is not saying that's what you need to have as a goal, but that is a goal that some people have. The second thing is just putting your content out there. Putting it out into the world is a fantastic goal to have. The third thing is putting your content out there to gain momentum, to hold you accountable and to make you be consistent and show up every single week for your audience. And the fourth thing is statistics. So like I said, go check out the other episode about podcast growth, but I really want you to let that sink in that downloads are simply vanity metrics. Okay? That's all it is. It is you seeing how successful you are, how amazing you are, how popular you are. But if you get so consumed with that, then you start to stray away from your message and while you're actually doing this. And that is what I want you to concentrate on. So that does it for this episode. So if you are brand new here, welcome and thank you for listening. Make sure that you subscribe. That way you don't miss future episodes that we have coming out. You can check out the show notes at crystalprofit.com/episode 112, where I'm going to link to all the things that we talked about here today. Make sure that you've signed up for the free 5-day Create Your Podcast Bootcamp. And remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.